Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
In my senior year of high school, I decided to start applying for agriculture schools. There is a really good one, Central America and Honduras. His name is Zamorano University. So I was in Zamorano for 4 years in Honduras studying tropical and subtropical agriculture.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius podcast. I have Dario Chavez. He's an associate professor at University of Georgia in the Horticulture department. And we're going to talk about, surprise, surprise, peaches, because you know they're associated with Georgia. So, Dario, thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. And it is a pleasure always to be able to talk about peaches.
Well, tell me a bit about your background. What got you interested in peaches?
Yeah, my background is kind of unique, probably as you can hear in my accent. I am not originally from the United States. I'm originally from Ecuador, South America. Come from a 4th-generation farming family, and we are located in the Andes, basically in the mountains. And parents used to plant, and my grandparents used to plant potatoes, corn, carrots, and other crops from the Andes. And then had some dairy cattle and beef cattle. So finally, it's funny how when you're a kid, you really don't see that. When you are living in a farm, you really don't see that as your future sometimes.
Yeah, you probably want the opposite sometimes.
No, well, it's just funny. You never think about it until it hits you that you actually enjoy doing it. In my senior year of high school, I decided to start applying for agriculture schools. There is a really good one, Central America and Honduras. His name is Zamorano University. So I was in Zamorano for 4 years in Honduras studying tropical and subtropical agriculture. After that, I sadly never went back to my country. I basically kept going with education and did my master's at the University of Florida in blueberry, then my PhD later on in peaches, citrus, some mandarins, and some plums. And after that, I started applying for jobs, and the position in Georgia was open, and basically it was meant to be.
Well, when you do advanced study in, plums and peaches and things like that, master's, PhD, what do you study? Like, what was your PhD about?
Yeah, so in my master's, it was so my background is genetics, plant breeding and genetics, and for my master's, I basically was working on the southern high bush. That's the major type of blueberries grown in the southeastern U.S. And I was looking at the wild species of Basinium darwii. That is basically one of the ancestral parents of the whole southern high bush blueberry industry. So I was just trying to increase the genetic diversity from material in the wild in Florida that my advisor had collected. So I did a lot of work with that, a lot of crosses, and a lot of advanced material that is probably still going around in the breeding program, in the blueberry breeding program at the University of Florida. And for my PhD,
go ahead.
Yeah. And for my PhD, I basically kind of continue in the area of wild genetics, wild species, and I worked on studying the North American plums. Funny enough, a lot of people don't know that a center of diversity for plums is actually North America. So what I did for my PhD was travel all across the U.S. collecting wild species of plums, and is collecting basically fruit and plant material, and also sharing it with the National Germplasm repository for future access of the by breeders or horticulturists or whoever wants to use it. And then I study also the species relationships between the different wild species and compare with the plums and peaches and other things.
Yeah, okay. From what I understand, this may be wrong, but it seems like growers will focus on just one kind of banana or peach or plum or whatever it is, and there's no diversity in what they grow, and therefore I guess there's a lot of danger that an entire crop could be wiped out. Do you see that with peaches and plums, or is it not that case?
It depends. Like you can see a lot of bottlenecks, and that's what basically we call them in the breeding and the genetics. So basically, there was a variety of cultivar that was far superior, so everybody started using it as a pairing. So you basically close or narrow your genetic base because everybody's using that material. So it does happen with other crops, and the idea is to be able to keep that genetic diversity moving. So that's why always you try to bring material from outside or the closest that you can have to a wild type, because during breeding and selection we lose certain things. Like if we're breeding or selecting for, let's say, a superior fruit size or color, maybe we're losing some of the quality traits. Those quality traits are in older varieties that, at the time, basically they were not focusing on those traits that were important. And the same thing with diseases. I think so that's the main case where people go to the wild species to try to find resistant or genes of interest that can help us with those things. So yeah, that is kind of the idea about studying the wild species.
Well, do universities or large farms, do they have a deliberate area that they keep wild and they breed all kinds of stuff, like a nursery?
It depends. So there is, if you look at breeding programs, there is what is called public and private institutions or companies. So public, normally you have what would be universities. You have the federal government as well. The USDA has some breeding programs as well. But then you have a lot of private companies that now have the kind of a vertical system, in the sense of like they do breeding and genetics, produce their own varieties, and they also grow it. So basically they are feeding the pipeline. They are producing varieties that they know that commercially or horticulturally speaking, they can do whatever they need to for their market window. So bigger companies tend to do that. They have their own breeding and they have their own R&D for basically horticulture management.
Oh, it's good they do that, because again, just from the the public point of view, it just seems like again, only one kind of banana is being used, correct. Only one kind of this, one kind of that.
Yeah,
it just doesn't make sense, because again, if there's a big pest problem or disease or everything can be wiped out.
Yeah,
I'm glad that some people are doing this. Is it being done on a mass scale, or is it not focused on very much, in your opinion?
So there's companies that are sometimes located in a regional aspect, or it can be also international companies. If you think, for example, if you go to the supermarket and let's just talk about the small fruits, you see Driscoll's, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, and others. Well, they do have their own breeding programs, and their breeding programs basically are located in California, Florida, Mexico, Europe, different locations in Europe. So they are already an international company which are basically breeding varieties for their growers. So they have different varieties for different regions. And also they are producing new material for their growers as well.
So what are you studying right now about peaches? Like, what are you responsible for at the university, and what are you studying?
Yeah, so my position is what I call the peach specialist for the University of Georgia. and my main focus is horticulture management. I have been working a lot in irrigation and fertilization management, trying to set up updated guidelines for both of them, both fertilization and irrigation. And then also I have been doing a lot of rootstock trials. What I mean by rootstock trials is basically there is new cultivars, new genetic material that is being produced by either commercial companies, private companies, or the USDA or universities that basically are rootstocks that can be adapted to the region, and they have certain characteristics that are important for us. For example, nematode resistance or adaptability for the heavy soils that we have, and so on. So we do a lot of those trials, looking at the new rootstocks, how will will fare basically for Georgia and the southeastern U.S. In addition, I have been doing some also on studying and basically breeding and selection for materials that basically are adapted to the South Georgia and North Florida area. We have a program that has been breeding peaches for that area since the 90s, and it has been in collaboration with the University of Florida, Dr. Jose Chaparro, and the USDA with the former rootstock breeder, Tom Beckman. That breeding program has been breeding basically material for the Gulf area for now 30 years. The nice thing about that breeding program is that we have seen a lot of issues with climate, basically variation from year to year. What it means is that, some winters are very hot and we don't accumulate enough chill. And chill is basically the amount of cold that we get for a plant to basically come out of dormancy. And dormancy, people think about dormancy is basically when you have the fall, the leaves start coming down from trees and growth stops. And basically the plants go into a dormant state, and that's called dormancy. And then, we have to have enough cold and basically chill hours that we accumulate for that plant. And then once we start getting warmer temperatures in the spring, then they will start blooming or leafing out. So the nice thing about the South Georgia program, again in collaboration with the University of Florida and the USDA, is that program has been doing selections for this climate variability for years. So we have certain varieties that are very interesting because they are consistently producing fruit year after year, even when we have either freezes or we have warmer winters and things like that. So we keep going with that effort and investing a lot of time to try to keep that breeding program going, because I believe it's currently the only breeding program in a public institution, university, that actually targets that chill requirement, that chill range of cold.
What happens if the chill is shortened, where it's not deep enough? What will the trees do?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing about the peaches. If you have a peach tree that is basically has, let's say, 900 chill hours, that's normally what you will need for middle Georgia, and you get 400 or 500 chill hours, and basically those trees don't bloom and even have a very hard time actually even leafing out. So chill is very important. It kind of is a reset button for a plant to come out and start growing again.
How do the trees know how much chill there is? Like, do they have a molecular clock that counts up the chill hour?
Correct. So once they go dormant, there's a molecular system within the plant that basically starts a light also for the period and also a temperature that tells them that basically, we're in cessation, we're getting what we need. And then once they accumulate what they need, basically the plant is just waiting for warmer temperatures. So it is two parts basically. One is the chill requirement, but also there's a heat accumulation afterwards as well.
Has anyone been able to study where the clock is that, again, essentially counts the chill hours?
Yeah,
how it works?
So there is a lot of studies, and actually there is a person that's doing a pretty interesting study in Wisconsin. actually knew him from grad school. He's just trying to determine that basically how the clock works, because it sometimes, if you look at it from the perspective of having a chilling requirement and heat accumulation, it's like you have two different things working against each other. Being able to select or characterize plants using both of those systems, it's kind of complicated, because if you think about it, when the chill is accumulated or is fulfilled, and when the heat requirement starts clocking in, it is kind of a gray area. But this person is actually trying to create a whole new concept, and I guess a whole new idea of how these are not disconnected. They're actually just one thing. For me, it would be difficult to explain because it's pretty new. So I'm still grappling with the idea. But if you want, I can provide you with information of him. You can have a really great conversation with him, to be honest with you.
Sure. We'll chill out later.
Yeah.
Is there any way to the temperature and is a short chill season, not many hours, but the chill is very deep, or long and deep, or long and shallow, etc. What about temperature? How does that affect how the peach trees grow? Hey, Dario, did you hear my question?
No, I didn't hear you. Can you repeat it again? Sorry.
Sure. What about the temperature of the chill? So like the number of days, the number of hours is important, as you mentioned. But what about the degree of the chill?
Yeah, so that's another funny question. It's a very interesting question. So there's different models that have been figured out by different researchers. So the basic one and the most known one are Weinberger models. And then those are basically below 32 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And then there is the modified is basically between 32 and 45. And the normal is below 45. And then there is a Utah model. The question is difficult to say it in here because I don't remember all the steps, but it basically has a heating component that it creates a negation to the chill. So if you get warmer days, it will negate the amount of chill that you're getting. And then there is a new one called the dynamic model that was proposed by Chavez from Greece. And the interesting thing is that actually works pretty nice for the kind of environment that we have. So that's a new model that we're using. And the dynamic model, instead of talking about chill hours, that's the terminology that we normally use for the Weinberger model. We talk about chill portions. And basically the chill portions, what it does is, let's see if I can explain in general terms, is that it's like you have two buckets, and let's say the water is coming down in the first bucket, and the first bucket is a little bit above the second one. And then when the first bucket fills itself up, then it drops down, the water drops down to the second bucket. So the first bucket is basically like immediate amount of chill that the plant is getting. What means is that, let's say today we have a chill accumulated, and then all of a sudden we are going to have a whole week of chill. So because it's a constant and throughout the whole week, it basically says, we have this whole week of chill accumulated and it becomes more permanent. So that amount of chill or water flows to the second bucket. And that second bucket is basically a chill portion that is permanently basically part of the plant now. Now, it can happen the other case that, you get chill today, but tomorrow is going to be really warm. So basically what happens is that bucket just fills today to whatever level it fills, but because tomorrow is going to be warm, instead of dumping to the more permanent chill portion, it actually just throws away that water. It doesn't go to that permanent bucket. So it basically, it works in a kind of a sense of like, if you have a constant weather, cold, cooler climate, you get a more permanent, a better quality chill accumulation. But if you get days that you get a cold day, and then tomorrow a warm day, and then warm day, and then cold day, you basically know that the plant is not going truly in a cessation. And
Well, it
basically,
sounds like it resets the clock in a way.
correct. So this is a very interesting model, but the interesting thing about it is that when you compare the amount of chill portions that are supposed to be required by the variety to the amount of chill portions that you receive, and what will you see physiologically speaking in the field at the end of the season, it actually explains better than the other models. It makes more sense physiologically speaking. So California has been using it for almonds, things that they are using it for peaches as well. We recently, almost the last 3 years, we have using it for peaches. It's South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia. I'm not sure
How
if
predictive is it?
it's pretty. You mean predictive, like in the season, like you know how much chill portions are you going to be getting, or how the plants are
Yeah,
going to
right. You go through a season and you say, "Oh no, we're probably not going to
Yeah.
have much," or "Oh, great, we're going to have this." You know, like, can you estimate the harvest bounty, the yield?
So no, you cannot estimate the harvest yield, but you can estimate if the plants are going to act physiologically speaking normal. What I mean by that is that you have an estimate of where, let's say, if you have a chill accumulation that requirement of a plant for 30 chill portions, and you just got 20, you know that you're in trouble.
Is there anything that can be done to, I don't know, to shock cool them or to keep them warmer? I mean, I guess keeping them warmer than normal is maybe easier than keeping them cooler than normal. I don't know. What could you do to modulate?
So there's different ways that we can do it. And some of the ways that we can do it are either genetically. Some varieties are actually better adapted to certain conditions like that. So what we have found in the last years of lack of chill is that there's certain varieties that even when we have a year that we don't get enough chill, they will still come out of dormancy and will act pretty normal, have a good yield. And those varieties were interested because basically they are adapted to those conditions. And that is why I was saying that the South Georgia program is very interested, because we get that variation year after year. Now, there is also chemical products that can be used. Dormex is one that has been used in blueberries. It has been tried in peaches, but sadly, it is not as consistent as we would like. So sometimes we have come with a decision that basically it's better not to do anything and just let the plants come out of dormancy by themselves. And another things that we're doing is actually researching other compounds that have come up as products that will help with that. So we're looking into products that basically will do what you just said, allow the plant to come out of dormancy and also synchronize the bloom. So that means that it will synchronize as well the harvest. So in the way we don't have to have, like, let's say a peach variety that needs to be harvested for 1 week instead of having a peach variety that will be harvested 3 or 4 weeks because of the lack of chill. Lack of chill basically will just increase the period of bloom, which will be a problem as well.
Yeah, I mean, how long do peach trees take to become mature where they produce peaches, from scratch? How many years?
Normally a peach tree takes about 40 years when you get the commercial amount of basically that you will get for a mature tree. But you can have a harvest a year tree as well.
Well, that's I guess a big question of mine is how can people understand, again, the clocks that determine, how does the tree know it's been 4 seasons? Where is the internal mechanism that stores that information up on a clock or a counter? And could you make it, do you think you can modulate it where a peach tree could produce in 2 years instead of 4? Is anyone studying that?
So a tree can produce in 3 years, but it's just more the transition between a juvenile to an adult. So it's more about the size of the tree and also the transition from juvenile to adult. You need a bigger canopy. So it's more about the tree growth than anything else related. If you had a bigger tree from year 1, you will have fruit from year 1. It's just basically just because you don't have that canopy yet.
Well, again, all right. So there is enough. The tree senses that there's enough of certain nutrients, and therefore it can go to, not go to seed, but produce fruit. Like, what are some of the cues that you'd imagine that a tree uses to know, okay, this year we're going to produce fruit versus not?
You mean like in year 3 or year 4 or
Yeah,
independent
like
year 1?
what changes between year 3 and 4, or year
Again,
2 and 3?
it starts producing more flower buds instead of just doing vegetative buds. So you have the canopy size basically just starts being more reproductive. Like you get flower buds that will be set. Generally speaking, you can have a crop in year 3, but you try to avoid having a large crop because you want to grow the canopy, commercially speaking.
Right, but the tree must know, okay, now I have enough branches to produce the right kind of flowers. But how does it know that?
I'm trying to understand the question, but I don't think so. I understand with what
I'll
side
just
that you're
think,
asking.
what's the difference between a juvenile and a mature tree besides just size? What are some of the other differences
That's what I'm
physiologically?
saying. So it doesn't produce the amount of flower buds, basically mostly vegetative buds, for reproductive systems to produce a fruit. Basically, it just happens to when you have that transition.
Okay. And then a couple questions on rootstocks. So are rootstocks harvested at the end of a growing season? And, what if pesticides and all these other sides are applied to it? What happens to the rootstock if you're going to use it as breeding or grafting for later on? Do you have to do it before, the plants are sprayed, or have ones that never get sprayed, or it's just, the chemicals sprayed on them go along with the rootstock?
So the rootstocks are basically, are you asking commercially speaking how they are produced, or?
Any which way. What happens in terms of pesticide use?
Yeah, so the rootstocks, if you go to the nurseries, commercial nurseries, what they do is they buy the seed or their vegetative cuttings, rooted cuttings of the rootstock, and they basically plant them in the field as if you thought about in a high density system, where the easiest, simplest comparison would be corn. You basically plant the rootstocks very close to each other, and have to do chemical management and other management as needed. For example, take care of weeds and fertilize those rootstocks, and also any insect that may damage the foliage or damage or create issues for the growth of the rootstock. So once the rootstock grows for a season, if they planted the seed, let's say this winter, that seed will germinate next year, and that seedling will grow basically until June, and in June it will be budded. So it will have enough caliper, pencil size, or even more, to be able to be budded with a commercial Scion variety. And that commercial Scion variety can be whatever the growers pay for contracts for it, or it can be basically whatever they are offering in their nursery. So that Scion variety that is budded in June, those buds get basically kept and grow, so the plant can have two genetic organisms together, both the rootstock and the Scion. Now, the rootstock that are selected are very region dependent, because they have certain traits that are of interest for the region. It could be like nematode resistance or fish to shore life, in the case of the peaches. So if you can have 3 or 4 different rootstocks in a nursery, depending on what the growers want.
Yeah, but how do you grow organic peaches if the rootstocks are all sprayed with chemicals and stuff?
Well, that basically will have to be a nursery that is growing organic. So they basically will have to follow all the procedures, since the seed propagation or growth or the cuttings. So it will have to basically have all of that. Instead of using herbicides for weeds, you will have to plow the middles, and then the fertilizer source will have to basically be organic, be able to be used in an organic setting. So you can do it. It's just that you will have to be basically organic managed. Now, I don't know how the commercial nurseries deal with this, and I don't know if they actually have or offer organic plants or seedlings. That's a good question, but there is some organic commercial growers in the state of South Carolina mainly, and I know that there's probably some in California. They do have basically some of their production system in organic production. I don't know if by regulations, USDA regulations, or an orchard just has to be like 3 or 4 years without the use of pesticides. So if you know that a plantlet that you are growing is basically has been just commercially grown, that is not going to produce any fruit in 3 or 4 years, I am not sure that if you need or not an organic plantlet being propagated for you. It again is something that I don't know, but I'm just wondering that.
Well, has anyone looked at the the success or uptake of rootstock grafts, for organic versus non-organic peach trees?
I haven't had it hasn't been part of my objectives for my program, so I have not looked at it, and I don't know if somebody else has looked.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Like if you have how long can peach trees produce peaches for? How old can they get till they?
You can produce for 3 to 4 years. It will start producing, and then you can keep a tree for 13, 14 years.
So what happens to the trees that are, let's say, like 10 years old? What are the peaches like versus ones that are new? It's their first year where they spit out peaches. What's the differences?
Differences mainly is the yield. You will have basically a bigger amount of peaches being produced. In general, the fruit would be almost the same. There's really not a lot of differences.
Has anyone tried to characterize them? I mean, and why do peach trees stop growing fruits? What happens to them when they're like 13 years old?
They don't stop growing. They just die.
Well, why? So the whole tree dies?
Yes, the tree dies because of basically different diseases in the soil. Peaches have been produced in this region for 2, 3, 4 generations. So you're planting peaches in the same area that once were planted before. So there's a lot of replanting diseases. There's a lot of issues with health, tree health. And normally peaches start basically going down around year 13. You start losing scaffolds because of insects and other damages, mechanical damages or different things. So it becomes not economically feasible to keep a tree that basically just producing 1 scaffold versus 4 or 5 scaffolds. So it makes more sense.
I mean, they're aging then. The trees are aging. Otherwise, why would this happen? So so has anyone studied, again, peaches that are from younger trees versus older ones? I would think there's got to be something different about them. Maybe taste
there is a nutritional aspect, the differences between the trees, but flavor-wise, it's the same. We have done sensory studies from different varieties, and we really don't see that much differences in the sense of like if you look at a peach variety from one location to another, there's a lot of differences. So being able to pinpoint a difference from age versus a difference from location, or a difference for production management setups, or it would be very difficult. There's too much variation. Do you understand what I mean?
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering if anyone has quantified these things. So okay.
We have a study looking at the sensory aspects of different varieties, just trying to see varieties that may, personally speaking, taste better. There's differences about the amount of volatiles and quantities that they produce, but then when you compare the same varieties one year to another, you get differences too. So that's why I kind of try to say that to me it will be very difficult to be able to pinpoint that to age or things like that.
Okay. All right. Well, very good, Dario. What's the best way for people to find out more about your work? Where can they go?
Yeah, we have a website at UGA. It's called Chavez Lab UGA. If you search in Google, the website will come up, and then you can see a lot of our research and things like that.
Okay. Well, very good, Dario. Thank you for for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
No problem.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes. You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.